This is Damian Pardo, and welcome to the Forward Miami Show. I'm thrilled today with two amazing guests. We're going to have a lot of fun. But before we go there, you need to know May 20th at La Tropical, a huge celebration, a party you have to be at. People are going to be asking for freedom in Cuba and celebrating the freedom that will come to Cuba. And with me, I have two activists, two people who are in our community all the time, Victoria and Vanessa, on the front lines, constantly making the case. Super important. And they both are with Abracamino Collective. Abracamino Collective.
Yep.
Perfecto.
So I want you to talk a little bit about what's Abracamino Collective.
Okay, so
Well, first of all, it means opening paths, so abriendo camino, and that's where it's sort of why it's named that. But we named it that while we were making Amparo, the Amparo experience, which we made together, and at some point we created a song that was called Abre Camino. And it felt like it was doing something really emotive and opening things up, and that people were connecting to it. And we were like, that's what we want for our company.
we did try to name it like three different things. I think at one point we called it Martí Maceo, and we were like, no, El Caballo Blanco. We did a lot of things that we're very glad that got scratched off.
Yeah.
But in essence, what we are is an entertainment and art company of literary, music, obviously film and television, theater. And so we bring stories together. We do it in the way that we call it radical storytelling, and just create paths for stories that people aren't used to listening to.
Okay, so why Cuba?
Oh my God.
For the sound.
I know. I mean, part of me thinks we didn't even have an option, but meaning that we're born into Cuban parents, into a Cuban family. We are the children of exiles. I have political prisoners in my family. Your family came later in Mariel, and then
political prisoners. And gusanitos all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's always been something that's within us, and something that we met in 2015, and we started sharing our stories. We started realizing how similarly we grew up. We grew up in like near each other.
Yeah.
And our families have always put that in us. Like, we always grew up very, very Cuban.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you also, I think that when you live in Miami, you think that everybody knows this story, and people don't actually know this story. And so once you leave Miami and you go, for me and my kids, actually for you probably as well, it was New York City. You're starting to live there. You start to tell a story, and people are very, very far away from what the story of Cuba is, and sort of like reality versus propaganda machine, all of those things. And that all of a sudden, for me, at least initially, like as a teenager, like 20 or 18, 19, 20, I was like, I don't know if I want to tell this story. This is so much. And then it was like, no, you have to tell the story. And then it becomes a kind of obsession to tell the story, and a need to tell the story. And then here we are.
And then you find another crazy person who needs to tell the story. And so then it's impossible not to do Cuba.
But I mean, it's a compelling story in the sense of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Because bottom line, at the core,
Yep.
it's freedom. And we're living it right now with Ukraine. We're seeing it throughout the world,
Yep.
In many ways. And I think being able to tell it in that way is also a challenge, because, listen, obviously, a lot of people who are Cuban Americans, second generation, et cetera, get it, have gotten it, and try to tell that story. But for the folks out there who aren't Cuban American, why should they care?
Because I think that there's a moment right now in time that we're looking at a space in which there are democratic governments and there are authoritarian regimes, and that's happening all over the world, and we have to point them out, and we can't really lie about the ones that are not authoritarian, because that spreads as it has. And it's really important to know what goes on in those countries in which that is happening. Cuba being, whether people realize it or not, the head of that right now, in the sense that it has spread its dictatorial regime all over Latin America and other places. And so I think that people don't understand the effect that Cuba has on them, their personal life, and their personal freedoms right now.
And I also think that part of that is the underestimation of Cuba.
Yeah.
In general. It's I think that, as to like what Van is saying, is like, some people just think about us as the untouchable island 90 miles off the coast of Florida. But it's actually it's a center to the Latin American authoritarianism spread that is happening. And so being able to tell the Cuban story is, I always think about it as like how the tech people look at it, which is essentially like a sample sale. Like, this is the sample of how to like mess up a country. And so it's slowly and keep up people, and it worked. It worked. They messed it up. Wow, I'm very, very eloquent today.
That's great. I love it.
You're eloquent for me.
I think I'm going to use this sample sale
The
example.
sample sale. It's a sample sale of communism. And oh, Dios mío.
Perfect.
But it essentially is, people keep underestimating it and constantly have underestimated the story and how we tell it. So to get it out there is our biggest tool as storytellers, and how we help la causa, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I was watching 60 Minutes, and they had a I guess prima ballerina or principal ballerina from the Bolshoi who defected, Ukrainian, defected. And she said, amazing things. But among what was said in that segment was that in communist governments, art is politics. It's a weapon. Yeah. And the Bolshoi is a weapon. Mm-hmm. I thought that was so powerful because we live, especially in the art world and in the more liberal circles, there's that whole idea that art could never be contaminated with politics. And I think in general, people are very naive about communist regimes and how they use propaganda, particularly in the arts. Yeah. And, maybe you could comment a little bit about.
I mean, I think that's also why it's so powerful that when artists take back their art, it is such a massive tool for freedom. So in Cuba right now, the movement that's being led is by artists, because they're saying you can't control our voice anymore. It all started because there was a decree that laid out that this has always happened in communist regimes. It has always happened, but the Cuban government put it into the law. It basically said you cannot make art without our consent and our authority over it. It literally says that in the law. So artists said, no, you can't take my voice over and over and over again. Art cannot be without being free, or else it's propaganda, right? That's what it becomes. So yeah, there's a major power struggle that gets played out through art all the time. And there is a weaponization of it, and there is a great power in taking that back. So
I reposted that, and all I did was put Cuba with a thinking emoji, because people seem to understand Ukraine here locally in a way that they don't understand Cuba. Yeah. I see all the Ukrainian flags in profiles, etc., but then these are the same folks that are silent. Yeah. When it comes to Cuba.
And I think that the main reason for that is that there is a clear understanding of Russia bad guy and Ukraine democracy good guy. But Cuba has been such a slippery little sucker, if you will. And the government has done such a good job at their propaganda and how sneaky their propaganda is. And so there is not a clear understanding of who the bad guy is. And to put it in very like little kid terms, but it is like this group of people who are oppressing this entire country, and it's not letting them. So part of the storytelling and the pushing of that forward is to make sure that that it's all clear, that it's not foggy anymore, that it's not like, well, but and then the comment that's always made, like, but the embargo, but this, but that. And it's like, put that all to the side. Let's just talk about these people, putting these people in jail for thinking differently. Is that fair? No, I would consider that person a bad person.
Absolutely. And in a place like Miami, this issue, and for my friends who are non-Cuban, this is how I approach them. I'm like, listen, I know this is not your issue. Yeah. I know that maybe you don't even want to deal with it. You've had it, like it's toxic in some ways. Yes. But you need to understand that locally, this is a very divisive issue. Because every time we have like you remember when the Van would come, when artists from Cuba would come or be invited by local arts organizations, the local folks would be upended and offended that the Cuban community would have issues or take issue. Yeah, well, and it's the most natural thing in the world to take issue when this is your oppressor. Yeah, coming in a different form, pretending to be something that it really, isn't.
Yeah, I mean, with that, we had someone tell us the other day, and I will not say specifics because let's not get anyone in trouble here, but they were
Oh,
hiring a
trouble.
band. They were hiring a band, and they were from Cuba, and they would say to them, okay, but you have to give me 2 contracts. The one that I can show to the Cuban government and the one that goes to me, because otherwise the Cuban government keeps their money. The Cuban government, I mean, there's so much that's tied to that. How do you get out of it? And then it's un enredo it's a big mess. It's a tangle.
And I think that on top of that enredo, only the people that truly lived that enredo or understood that, the fact that people constantly, in this country in particular, tell them that their history is incorrect is even more frustrating. There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like there's a gag over you as you speak. And so it is, I mean, Elian was the same thing, right?
Yes,
it's like
very much.
In American eyes, it's a custody case. in our world, it's us against Fidel Castro. Like it's a legitimate, there's reason for this. And so something that we constantly talk about is how the American brain, the brain formed in America cannot fathom what happens in Cuba.
Right.
And so dealing with those and how to communicate it
and
is
how much of that is media? Because that always, I'm shocked by the coverage and the lack of it often.
Yeah.
And how they cover it.
Well, and also that, like you're saying, the Cuban regime is such a little slippery sucker, and that they're so good at it that you hear people sometimes get to the point that they're like, well, I mean, yes, and they have a dictatorship because they want a dictatorship. And is there something wrong with a dictatorship? And you're like, rewind. Like, stop. But you actually hear they're very good at it. They're very good at it. And the thing is that if the regime is telling you that, it's not the people that are telling you that, because the people are completely controlled in the sense of you cannot make art without us. You're not voting. You're not doing any of that. So,
and the ability also, I mean, we deal with this a lot, but the ability of someone in order to get out, to sell a piece of themselves in order to get out of that. So like there's certain artists that, things that we only think about, like, well, why does that artist get to go out? Why doesn't that artist get to go out? And there's such mess in dissecting who the other person is, which is the thing that the regime did, which is make us all lack in trust of each other.
Completely.
I had a family member who couldn't get paintbrushes, couldn't get paint because he didn't go to the Communist Party, meetings, public forums, never did. So everything had to come through Spain, very clandestine, just to be able to get brushes and paint. Here, he's very successful. He's done phenomenally well. He got out and he's made a wonderful career. But there, he couldn't get anything seen. He couldn't get out of Cuba. He couldn't. So I think people don't appreciate that if you are in art in Cuba and you're traveling and the government is promoting you, it's because you're singing their song, and only because you're singing their song.
And I think there are artists that are trying to figure out some kind of change from within, and they're trying to figure it out. And then we've talked to people themselves that have told us, you get so dirty. You know what I mean? Like it's so messy.
And sometimes without trying.
And
what do you mean by dirty?
They're trying to be artists. They're trying to go out in the world. Do I travel? Yes, I'm going to travel so that I can actually make my art, right? Because if I can make art in another place, at least something is being told of the story, right? But it always has a veil over it because you cannot actually tell the story if you're being held by the regime. And so it's this double speak all the time. You're speaking and you're double speaking and you're triple speaking and there's no clarity. And what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And a friend of ours once said, in Cuba, someone at some point has always been un chivaton without knowing.
A teller, a tattletale.
A tattletale. Thank you. And part of it is like the act of mancharte, of dirtying you, of all I need to do is this one thing so that then you are part of this mess. Like it's not to stay squeaky clean probably ends you up in a political prison. And we've talked to people, especially around July 11th, where like people would talk about Jose Daniel Ferrer and be like, no, that guy's a total bad guy. That's horrible. And it's like, no, that's actually not the narrative. This is what it is. Oh, espérate. Oh, okay. So they try to create as much as possible this like you can't get out of my web.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. This is very also very detailed and specific. I think that the key is that everybody has to tell their own story, because that's the thing, and we say this over and over and over again, that no one can take from you. You know what your story is. You tell your story so that people can understand what is happening to you one at a time, right? So like if everyone starts to tell their story, or tells their story to someone so that they can tell their story, you know what I mean? Then that's the only thing that we have right now. I think that's the most powerful tool that we have right now.
I would say that and human spirit. I think that the Cuban is an emblem of what the human spirit can do, because boy, oh boy, have they been crushed over and over and over again. And somehow we're also slippery suckers. And somehow, July 11th happens, somehow that happens. And that is, I think, a testament to the human being and to the ability of also art of saying, well, there's something here that's not. And I mean, Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara is not part of their structure. Like he by no means was part of their structure. And that's what bothers them.
Mm-hmm. And that's also what you're celebrating May 20th.
Yes.
I mean, that's also what that human spirit, that ability to rise above the phoenix, rise from the ashes.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's also a lot of our hopes with Cuba in general as a community.
I mean, on May 20th, we're going to have El Funky, which is, part of Patria Vida, and who's
a rapper,
soul brother, a Cuban rapper, and who's, soul brother, friend, and part of this movement also, which is Michael Osorbo is in prison still right now. Wow. So El Funky's gonna be there. Raudel, Afro Beta,
Yoli Mayor,
Cachita.
I love Afro Beta.
Yeah.
Yoli Mayor. So that's a great lineup.
It's
People
really
are
good.
Really have fun.
Yes,
they are. And also what they're going to see is the blend. I think that one of our main goals is that that people who believe in freedom, Cubans and Cuban Americans, that we start bridging together, that kind of bridging, that sort of solidarity between Cuban and Cuban American towards freedom.
Yeah.
And so this is a celebration of that. This is a celebration of our diaspora, our heritage, of how the Cuban American has formed music about liberty and freedom, being from over here, and the people like Raudel Escuadron, who was underground and rapping when it's still dangerous to do so, bringing those people together for a un vocifero.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, it's also a call and response, right? A call and response across, from like Cubans from the island, from Cuban Americans talking to each other, and then from the stage to the audience, inside the audience, going back into the street. Pa la calle is what it's called. So
it's called Pa la calle.
Yeah.
So taking it to the streets.
Take it to the street. And we should say that it's twofold. There's a concert, VIP concert on the 20th at La Cervecería Tropical, and
that's in Wynwood.
In Wynwood. And then the following day is a street party on the street. Also tons of music, a great lineup. And this is also the La Tropical's 1-year anniversary. And Manny Portuondo, who is the guy running the show there, and has an amazing story of his own. Yeah. He really wanted to do something to align that 1-year anniversary and what it was to take back his story and that narrative and make something for a free Cuba. So those things coming together is actually really beautiful.
And a piece of our history, just because I'm a nerd and I love this, but La Tropical was the place where Benny More and all these people got their launch pad in Cuba.
I did not know that.
And so it's the perfect place
that
here.
That just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, really cool.
So in their jardines, this is what would happen. And so when we were first talking to Manny, he was like, we have to go back to what you guys were doing in Cuba, but make it ours now, right? Like make it ours.
It's amazing. Sorry, I was just gonna say.
So how much are tickets? Like, how much does this cost?
Sure. So Friday, the May 20th, the VIP concert, that's going to be $50, and we're accepting any extra donations because donations are going to Cuba Decide.
100%.
100% of the ticket sales. And La Tropical is coming in with 10% more on top of that.
So Cuba Decide is a benefactor.
Cuba Decide, Cuba Decide,
and Foundation of Human Rights for Cuba.
Okay.
as well as
the
project.
Martians, as well as the Martians, which is a project that we're doing about Cuban storytelling. Cubans telling their own story, the thing
Yeah.
we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So you going to have a good time helps Cuba.
Yeah. That's,
Getting-
I mean, wow. You
Yeah.
know, that's, where can they get tickets? Where can they?
There's Eventbrite. You can go to you can go to La Tropical's website. You can go to our personal pages or Abracamino's page, and there's a link to the Eventbrite, and you can get tickets for one day or both days. The second day is $10, and you go in. There's beer, there's music. It's a great time.
Yeah, it's a street festival on the second day. So it depends which way you want to go, but there's something for everyone, truly. And also, just a really fun fact, I just found out, I was talking about La Tropical with my family, and my stepdad's like, oh, I used to go there all the time because my uncle was the electrician there. And that
Talk about the universe.
is what you have to love about
aligning.
Miami.
The universe. That is what you have to love about Miami.
Yes.
Wow, that sounds like a really exciting time. You know, I wish I was here, but I'm actually going to be in New York.
Of course.
Doing your-
doing my thing.
Doing your thing.
Yeah.
Doing my thing. And I would also think that anyone that just understands this fight for freedom, whether you're Venezuelan,
Yeah.
Nicaraguan,
Yes.
Ukrainian, I mean, I don't know about you all, but when I look at the stuff happening in Ukraine, it's hitting me in a way that I'm not sure hits everyone the way
Yep.
it's hitting me.
Yep.
Because I get it. And these folks are up against all odds, probably going to be, you know, trounced in many sections.
Mhm.
And my heart, just more than my heart, you know, goes out to them. So I
Yeah.
hope that anyone that understands this story from whatever perspective comes on out. You know, if you're just a Miamian, an American, however, if you can relate to freedom, I hope everybody really takes it to heart.
Yep.
And comes out, and I'm sure it's going to be super, super successful. So I wish I could be in two places at once.
Just leave Saturday morning. Just go Saturday
Yeah.
morning and just go straight to March.
Definitely.
Thank you both. Thank you. So
Thank
much
you.
fun, and thank you
Thank
both
you.
for coming and being a part of the show.
Thank you.
And to everyone out there, we look forward to seeing you again next week on the Forward Miami Show.